This program begins with Timo Andres's Everything Happens So Much. Mozart's Piano Concerto in A major of 1782 follows. It is, like all 17 of the piano concerti Mozart composed between 1782 and 1791, a masterwork of the first order. But pride of place on the program goes to Antonin Dvořák's Symphony No. 9 of 1893, subtitled From the New World. Not only is it a pillar of the orchestral repertoire, but the story behind its creation is almost as interesting as the music itself. In 1892, for most people living in the United States, with the notable exception of most Black and Native Americans, it would have appeared that for all of its pollution and poverty, America was indeed the land of opportunity where anything was possible. America was taking its place besides the other great powers, and wasn't that just the ginchiest? The good folks in Washington, D.C. decided to throw the U.S. of A. a 400th birthday party and to invite the world. 4 cities competed for the right to host this World's Fair. Chicago was chosen, and on May 1st of 1893, the doors opened on what was called the Columbian, as in Christopher Columbus, Exposition. While 46 different countries were represented, the exposition was first and foremost a testament to American industrialism and innovation, and a symbol of the emerging notion of American exceptionalism. The exposition drew more than 27 million visitors in the 6 months it was opened, an astonishing number by any standard. Those lucky enough to be at the exposition on Saturday, August 12, 1893, could have participated in what was advertised as Bohemian Day. The climax of the day's activities was a concert by the Chicago Orchestra. Today, it is known as the Chicago Symphony Orchestra, featuring the music of the Bohemian-born composer Antonin Dvorák. When Dvorak himself came out on the stage to conduct his Symphony No. 8 in G major, the audience of 8,000 and the orchestra of 114 players gave him a 2-minute ovation. Dvorak in America. What was the almost 52-year-old Bohemian-born and raised Dvorak, a chronic hypochondriac who hated to travel, was terrified of crowds, and was prone to performance anxiety and panic? What was this guy doing, conducting in front of 8,000 people in Chicago, 4,534 miles away from his home in Prague? It's a good question. Here's the answer. By 1891, at the age of 50, Dvorak was that rarest of living composers, successful, world-famous, and relatively well-to-do. Dvorak's music has a distinctly Czech flavor, and it was Dvorak's fame as a nationalist composer that made him an attractive catch for an American philanthropist named Jeanette Myers Thurber, who had founded the National Conservatory of Music in New York City in 1885. On June 5, 1891, Thurber cabled Dvorak in Prague and offered him the directorship of her National Conservatory of Music. The moment was auspicious, as the following year, 1892, marked the 400th anniversary of Columbus's presumed discovery of America. At this signal moment in American history, Jeanette Thurber wanted Dvorak to help found, through his own nationalist example, an American school of composition at a time when almost every American composer wanted to sound like the German composer Brahms. Mrs. Thurber made Mr. Dvorak an offer he could not refuse. Come to New York, become the director of the conservatory, teach 3 hours a day, and put together some concerts. For this most modest schedule, the National Conservatory was prepared to pay dearly. Dvorak was offered a 3-year contract at a whopping $15,000 a year, the equivalent today of around $415,000 a year, and a 2,500% increase over Dvorak's salary at the Prague Conservatory. Dvorak took the job, but not for the money. The truth is, he was seduced by Jeanette Thurber's vision for American music. He was also in search of inspiration, which he found big time in the New World. He was also fascinated by the idea of America, a huge, sprawling, energy-filled meritocracy in which his own working-class roots would be considered an asset rather than as a liability. On September 27, 1892, Dvorak and his family disembarked in Hoboken, New Jersey, just across the Hudson River from New York City. He was the first famous European composer to ever visit the United States, and his arrival provoked a media frenzy. A few weeks later, the national celebration began, and thus Dvorak had a front row seat for one of the most sustained binges of Americana this nation has ever indulged. 2 months after Dvorak's arrival, the well-known critic James Huneker wrote an article suggesting that a messiah of American music, guess who, should employ Negro melodies to create a new American style of music. Meanwhile, Jeanette Thurber gave Dvorak a copy of Henry Wadsworth Longfellow's epic poem, The Song of Hiawatha, with the suggestion that Dvorak use it as the basis for what she called the great American opera. Well, Dvorak was swept up by all of this. An African-American faculty member at the National Conservatory named Henry Burleigh sang Dvorak's spirituals and plantation songs by Stephen Foster. Dvorak's not-so-scientific by modern standards investigation into American music took him to Buffalo Bill's Wild West show in the spring of 1893, where he heard and saw Oglala Sioux Indians sing and dance. All of these influences and more worked their way into Dvorak's Symphony No. 9, which was composed in New York City between January 10th and May 24th of 1893. With its references to Negro spirituals, the plantation songs of Stephen Foster, and Longfellow's The Song of Hiawatha, the symphony has been called, quote, the first great American symphony, unquote, which it is not. It is, in fact, a cosmopolitan work, a traditional German-styled symphony with a thematic veneer of Americanisms layered on top for color. In a rare outburst, Dvorak revealed his anger with those critics who attempted to paint him as an American composer. Quote, "Oh, so I am an American composer, am I? I was, I am, and I remain a Czech composer. I have only showed them," meaning the Americans, "I have only showed them the path they might take, how they should work," unquote. Much has been made about the resemblance of a number of themes in the symphony to pre-existing American songs, snippets that sound like spirituals, popular songs, even the English nursery rhyme song, Three Blind Mice. For example, the gorgeous English horn theme that begins the second movement has been described as a quotation of a plantation song called Massa Dear. Yes, much has been made about the resemblance of a number of Dvorak's themes to pre-existing American songs. Well, too much has been made about these resemblances. Over and over again, Dvorak labeled as nonsense the assertion that he had borrowed any pre-existing themes. Rather, he said that he had tried to capture and reproduce the spirit of the music he heard here in America. I quote Dvorak, "I have simply written original themes embodying the peculiarities of native music," unquote. If Dvorak's Ninth Symphony can be said to have been influenced directly by some external source, it would be Longfellow's poem, The Song of Hiawatha, which had been published in 1855. As previously observed, Jeanette Thurber wanted Dvorak to compose a Hiawatha opera. And while that never happened, it is understood that the second and third movements of the symphony were inspired by scenes from the poem. For example, Dvorak told a reporter from the New York Herald that his third movement was inspired by Longfellow's description of the dance of the Paupuk Kiwis. Admittedly, Dvorak's so-called research into American music was absurdly superficial, and his ideas about the nature of American music were painfully naive. But, however naive his ideas, Dvorak was indeed inspired by the music he heard in America, with which he created an inspired symphony. The Carnegie Hall premiere on December 16th, 1893 induced pandemonium. It was the single greatest triumph of Dvorak's compositional career. Dvorak's Symphony No. 9, his musical postcard from the New World, was a fitting conclusion to the year-long Columbian Love Fest that had begun the year before. Thank you.